Hello, welcome to Human Design Book Club. We are so excited to be back with you today, and we're talking about The Love Book by Ra Uru Hu. And it is February. It is Valentine's Day this week. So we're all in a little bit of the love spirit, I would think, or love hate, as we may see.
Mhm.
Here are your hosts for today's book club, Jen Cordes, Kayla Sita, and myself, Rebecca Anderson. We envision a world where everyone can live their truth, everyone can make decisions easily, people are safe to tell their story, people get to have fun together, community supports us while giving us the freedom to explore our individual paths. Love is everywhere because it is the eternal mystery, and it is the eternal mystery because it doesn't exist. Whoa, what's that about?
Starting right off with Ra. Yeah.
It's a very raw quote, but I feel like this love book, he does a decent job making it a little bit lovey-dovey. I feel like I liked him a little bit more after reading this, oddly enough, for how robotic he can be. So
Mm.
Did actually throw in a few nice things. I agree.
good,
Mhm.
yeah.
And so the book starts off with just explaining that what we think of love is actually connectivity in the chart, ways of interacting, levels of interacting, geometry alignments. These are just different, the ways that we come together mechanically. This makes us have a feeling of love or an interpretation of love. And there's a lot of different ways that these are expressed. It's a yearning for wholeness. Suffering is in the same place as our magic, the illusion that we're separate. True love is the design crystal plus the magnetic monocle because they represent wholeness where everything is experienced together. That is our transcendent oneness, but we have no capacity to experience it. We're not designed to experience the one because our totality is pulled together by monopoles. Jen, you were starting to talk a little bit about this design crystal and magnetic monopole piece. What are your thoughts about that?
Like it's funny, like I'm a Libra. I am a quarter of bonding. I'm a split, so I always think love is the answer to everything. But it's kind of funny as we start to go through this, he's a he's very focused on where you have definition is kind of like your way to love. And any place you don't have definition, like you're hanging, that's all conditioned. So on one hand, we're wanting to connect with other people, but yet the underlying message is as a 1057 and a 1034, I get to love through myself, not other people. And it's kind of, it just reminds me as you go up through the trainings and you're going through foundations and you can just get the message that, oh, a split is always looking for a relationship. But when you start to really look at these love gates, it's kind of like, where are you inside? And who do you want to sit next to and enjoy the time together versus this romantic illusion that apparently we all can share of the one, across the room and the sparks meet and oh my goodness, and that's just it. And it's really this sense of that's just you being conditioned. I mean, on one hand, he was gentler in this book, but he's still freaking raw. So I just, it's, oh, that's what he went farther on with this part where he was talking about, if you want to experience that true wholeness, die, because that's when the magnetic monopole and the design crystal come back together. And it's kind of sad in a way because we're constantly wanting and feeling into something that we just aren't built to have, according to human design. It reminds me too of, especially for people that have more tribal circuitry and the way that he would talk about it is, like, I wonder if this is also a big part of our quest for God, our search for meaning. We can think, oh, it's the person next to me that I also maybe have sexual feelings for, or all that other stuff that makes it more intense, but it's this something bigger outside of us that we want to connect to, because inside we know we come from something that is meant to be completely joined, and yet there's this space, and it's just, oh, I wonder sometimes when we talk about the issues with type, frustration, anger, bitterness, disappointment, if some of it isn't just in general, if you're not trusting how your body will naturally navigate you to the things that bring you to your signature satisfaction, peace, success, surprise, or I like to think of it as delight, that's where maybe we start to connect into that wholeness. So we can think satisfied of, oh, I did a good job. But the wholeness could also be, I was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be doing, and it felt good. And then because I was connected with something bigger than me. So I think he's talking about love, but I always think he's talking about that thing that he always comes back to, which is, are you on the right path? Seeing what you're supposed to see, being who you're supposed to be, hanging out with the people that are the proper conditioning for you.
Yeah, I thought he did a really good job of talking about love in a broad way too. Like it wasn't just about relationships with like husband and wife type thing, but you could see where you look at charts of like family members or children to where how they're going to show their love, or even if it is your significant other, you can really see how someone's love language almost is. And it's
Mhm.
like that's embedded in them and that's how they're going to show their love. And it may not be how you think they should show their love. But it's like when you look at the chart, it's kind of black and white the way he described it all. So I thought that was so nice. It kind of gives you like some gentleness with others when you
Mm.
have different expectations. And it's like maybe they just can't fulfill that because it's not in them.
Or they don't have any of the gates.
Yeah.
Not even that they don't have your corollary, but maybe they just don't have any. And it's like, that's a whole different experience.
Definitely. And for those just listening, we do have slides that we're going through, and these are also available for you to check out separately. And just check our notes and also check it out on the YouTube. Connecting creatures. Connecting is part of our program. It pulls us the deepest. Love is the umbrella term for connectivity. There is no true love, but it's our job to find a way to it. We sense the totality wholeness, design crystal plus magnetic monopole, and quest for it. We're designed through connectivity to invent ways of loving. That's our job. In your mechanics is the correct connectivity that will make a difference for you. It will give you the sense of satisfaction that you've found what you cannot have in life, and love your way. When love gates are part of a connection chart, powerful themes of love or the assumption of love emerge. Your design shows your themes. If you have the love gates, there's a fixed theme of love in your life. And if you don't, then there's no fixed theme of love in your life. Connectivity to that theme in the electromagnetic is when you experience the illusion of love. You get hurt when you hold on to what isn't yours. Anything here?
It made me think of going through rave psychology. I think that's where I was. You talk about when you have a hanging unconscious gate and the mind is not there at all. So just a red gate. That's a genetic pull, and that the body is always going to be pulling you to meet the other end. And if you happen to have a personality connection there, the mind at least says, oh, now I know why I'm here. But if there is no mind there and it's just the body, the unconscious pulling, pulling, pulling to meet it, it's like the mind is always going to be like, why am I here? Why do I care about this? And I thought that's an even deeper layer of what if one of your love gates are unconscious? And the mind is like, why am I attracted to this person? Fuss, fuss, fuss. I don't like this. This is upsetting, whatever. My type is this. It's not this. And that the body is like pulling, pulling, pulling. And I thought that could be another place where we have mental resistance to what's correct for us because the body is navigating and the mind just doesn't understand why.
Yeah. I like that correlation between it. Even if you have a love gate, there may be a different
Mhm.
sensation or experience if it's conscious or unconscious.
Or if it's Neptune and it's veiled, that's like another layer that's kind of a hard planet to get your arms around, at least in my experience. And you're like, not totally sure what's going on here. It shows up and then it's quiet and then it's loud and it's all over the place. Then imagine if you had those kind of vacillations and fluctuations and what was a love gate and it was unconscious. Like that's a big trip to be on.
Definitely. And Jen, I know you've been studying not self
Mhm.
themes, and when you throw in all that with this, it's
Mhm.
crazy. So Ra did divide the gates into two basic categories of anti-mundane and mundane. Anti-mundane through someone, vessel of love, transpersonal, deeply rooted in the monopole, potential of transcendent love, not felt as strongly as personal love. These are just like a bigger picture loves, as we'll see. And the mundane with someone, personal, demands personal connectivity. And this is our illusions of personal love. So when we look at it in these two different categories, it was fascinating to me to just recognize that some people could have this anti-mundane love gates, and there's that sense of love or a feeling of love, or there, should be love, but it's not for the other person necessarily, but the other person is they're trying to make it work, but they don't know why there's something missing or going wrong. But recognizing that these are just a broader types of love, then you could actually love that person because of that. I love the way that just awareness is the key to all this, along with strategy and authority. It's our protection. Gates of love are gates of hate too. A love gate in your design means you'll meet the call for it all the time. Themes of I love you or I don't love are always at work, so you're protected. If you're correct, where you'll find love, your gates, is where love is correct for you. And I also highlighted a couple quotes in here. Some of the ones when Ra was actually nicer, like we were saying, I highlighted a few of these. He says, "This is one of the things to understand about the beauty of what design does. It isn't going to take away the magic of how good love feels, no matter what the connectivity is, but it allows you to understand how it works. The moment you understand how it works, you can relax." And I just thought that was a really huge takeaway from the book. How about you?
I like that quote too. I had made it for my notes. And one thing that I really liked about when I was putting this slide together is when you have a vehement response to something. I hate this. I really don't like this. And it's strong. I like the idea of, instead of making yourself wrong for it, of just saying that's a stronger language because it's in a love gate. And that means that's not for you. Like, it just, so much of going farther along the path of design just seems like you're taking some of the weight off your shoulders. Like, you're not meant to like it. And maybe with another person, it's exactly what it should be. But with this person, that's coming out of you really strong. It's like, it's time to back off.
Here we go with the specific love gates where love emerges in us. We start off with 25, 15, 46, and 10. 25 being the universal love, being loving in the universe. It's an initiation of consciousness that can only thrive in form, love of everything. 15, loving humanity, loving being human. Live out the initiation through the form we're given to meet the other. Love of the species. 46, love of the form, loving the body. Serendipity, in this body, right place, right time. Love the personal human body. And 10, love being alive in the world as it is, pours what it holds, spirit of life, not the body separate from the life, transcendent and mundane. So we each carry several of these gates here. And I would love to hear if you have any specific thoughts about the ones that you have. I have the 46, love the form, loving the body. And I actually feel like as I'm getting more and more into my human design experiment, that I'm even loving my body even more and really appreciating it, this, this in the world and everything that it's here to experience. And I really appreciate this gate, and I love that it's a love gate because it, you know, all goes back to loving ourselves ultimately, and then we can love the other.
That I really liked how he described these gates and how he talked about a true self and a not self within the descriptions.
Mm.
And he's never really done that before. And so I thought that was nice because he kind of quoted like, in the true self, this is kind of the expression. In the not self, this is something that it might say. And I really liked that. And I have the 25 and the 10, and I feel like those are very general gates that are hard to get a grasp on what they mean. It was nice to have him talking a lot about a different way of looking at them. It helped me get a little bit of a deeper understanding of them.
Mm.
I was wondering, Rebecca, since you're set free to roam around the country, if that's part of the 46 might be tied in with that, is because you're letting your G center kind of navigate you wherever it needs to go. And as
Mhm.
there's more expansion and movement and connection with different people in different places, if that doesn't make it easier to tap in the love of the form because that body is guiding you more. That's why I like that part about serendipity is we tend to think, oh, that just means good luck, but it's because you let your body take you to where you're supposed to be at the right time and in the right place.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
And there's also experiencing all these different places and people. There's a freedom of just being
Mm.
as well that I've
Mhm.
noticed, that I've let myself experience.
I was reflecting after I put this together. I lived with a 29 for a couple of years. And so we had the electromagnetic. I have the 46 and he had the 29. And I thought it was interesting that during that period of my life, we were both very focused on our wardrobes. We were very focused on our presentation. And it was almost like we buffed our bodies, if that makes sense. Like everything was more polished, the behavior was more formal. And I thought, as I was putting this, I thought, oh, that was that electromagnetic. There was like a tight energy. Whereas when we're apart, we just have hanging gates. But when we came together, the body was given the proper commitment. So I thought that
Nice.
was cool. And I loved on gate 10 when he talked about, because this is the vessel of love that we're talking about here for the anti-mundane. I really like when you think about gate 10 as being almost like the lip or the part where that love is poured forth into the world. Because we
Mm.
can just think behavior and we think, all right, that means you're going to make yourself crazy about what you did or didn't do or all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like that's the expression of it as it moves throughout into the world. And I love that way of looking at gate 10. Because like Kayla said, or Rebecca, I'm sorry, which one, that it's kind of hard to get your arms around them. But I like that idea of that's just how it moves in the world. That it's not just our keynote of behavior or convictions, but it's like how it moves.
He really went deeper with the way he
Mm.
describes these gates in this way, and it was more like I could grasp it better when he was
Mm.
describing these than when I had first read them from the I Ching.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that gate 10 is both the
Mm.
anti-mundane and mundane. I highlighted a little quote about gate 10. I'm curious what you think of this one, both of you with 10. The 10th gate is part of integration. It's the deepest individual, melancholic, self absorbed aspect you can find in the body graph. Is that fascinating?
I could see that though. I mean, I get so caught up in correct behavior that it's overwhelming. Like nothing else can get in. So I'm worried about that. So like it's a lot. Yeah.
And I carry its integration. I carry the 57 and the 34. So I only feel well-being and intuitively plugged in and powerful and self-empowered when I am in my correct behavior. So as an integration generator, different from Kayla in that aspect, there's that part where I feel tapped into my power when my behavior is correct. So I'm really blinkered on that compared to worrying about what other people are doing. And even if I watch other people in the world, I'm still looking for what's the principle underlying that. Why is that okay for you and not okay for me? So when I observe behavior that irritates me or pleases me, even then it still comes back in of, is this a behavior for me to adopt? It is very, it's very self-focused. And yet, if you leave me alone, I'm just going to be a happy little generator bouncing around. Because one of the first things, and I find it so fascinating, and I think it's one of my true first sacral decisions was to become a vegetarian, like, oh my God, over 30 years ago, because it came from within. And it's usually something I'll talk about pretty early in a conversation. And I'm always presenting my convictions, and I can always tell whether that person is right for me or not, because they start to argue with me about it. Versus me saying, well, I'm vegetarian, I love it, I think the food is beautiful. I keep hitting it. And I thought, yeah, you're not talking my love language, literally. Is that like that for you, Kayla? Because I don't know if it's different being so tapped into my sacral compared for you.
I mean, mine comes more from myself,
Mm,
my G center, but it's
mm.
very similar. Yeah, very similar experience.
And so when we're talking about 10 in the mundane, and we have 44, also 40, 58, 41, 28, 55. It's where love emerges in us. 10, love yourself. Love being in the world as yourself. Discover love of self through the other, as you were just talking about. 44, love of talent, shared wealth. We can't be a success without the other. Earning love, provide for those you love. Respect is the ultimate. 58, perfecting love, love others through correcting others. Love that proves the strength of love. 41, love of dreams, pressure to desire. Can't experience love without sex. And that's, I believe he said, the only one that has the love and sex together.
Mhm.
28, loving purpose, no struggle equals no love. Struggle to live as yourself, and the love is there. 55, indecisive love, love through the spirit, magic of the unknowing of love. Were any of these specific gates anything that stood out to you as far as any ahas or something interesting?
I feel like I could go on and on about a lot of these.
Do it.
Um, I feel like, okay, so for starters, I really loved him talking about 40
Mm,
because he has it personally and it made me like Ross, right?
mm,
He's like, he always seems so very robotic and,
mm,
everything is just mechanics, but he's talking about being a mule for his family. And he's like, if you have a mule, just enjoy it. And my husband has a 40. And so it's like they're going to show their love through acts of service for you by going to work, by providing all that stuff. Like if you have that in your life, like you can just appreciate that. Like that's correct for them to show love that way. And so the whole part on 40, it was nice to hear Ra talk more personally about himself. And then also I feel like I have a lot of hard ones here. So I have the 58, the 10, the 28, and the 55. And so like if you're gonna love me for who I am, there's gonna be some correcting, right? And there's gonna be struggle. And 55, indecisive. Like you guys know, I'm so indecisive. It's very difficult. And I'd heard that about 55 before, but not as in depth as he went from it today or in this book. And so it was kind of nice to hear him talk about a lot of times when I can't make a decision, I think, oh, it's my open head. I'm just not certain. I'm just looking for certainty. So there is some not self in that, but it could be the indecisiveness is correct as well. So
mm.
it brought a bigger aspect into that indecisive nature that I very much have. So I don't know, I really enjoyed reading these. And then, like I said before, it was really nice to hear him talk about like, this is how the true self is going to express this, and this is how the not self is going to express this. So I could kind of go through and be like, okay, like where in the past have I expressed this correctly or incorrectly, and kind of look back and just look for those things showing up in my chart.
I know someone who carries the channel with 55, and not in human design at all, but I was just curious, like, do you find yourself to be indecisive? Because that has never been really my experience of her. She's also integration, but she carries the 20, and she goes, no, I don't think that way. But then I thought she has the bonding, the 59-6. And I wonder if when you've been together with someone and you made that decision a long time ago, there's no more indecisiveness about love because the bond was created and it's going. Whereas maybe when you're younger or before you quote decided on your partner, maybe that's where it's he loves me not, or you're moving through it. I
Mm,
thought maybe that's the difference between it being hanging in a channel
yeah.
and someone who's designed to bond, and then that's locked in. I I'm curious, Kayla, do you mind talking a little bit about your 28? I'm always curious about that because technically that's what's supposed to soften me as integration. But it's so funny to me to have a struggle soften into to you. I mean, you would think that it comes through almost like a fighting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know that the 28 is kind of the thing that gets integration, you
Hmm.
know. And I don't know, I'm not sure what you want me to say about it, but I thought it was interesting too that when he talked about the 28th gate, that in it is deep, deep individuality, and that in the end there is no purpose without the other. No fulfillment of purpose without the struggle and love. And so I thought that was interesting too, that this gate of individuality had so much to do with the other. I thought that was curious as well too.
Because when with you carrying the channel, and I think that's different too, and you've got the full
Yeah.
strength versus someone else. But when you just shared your experiment in general, like that, I probably made that harder than it needed to be, but it was what it was. Or I sometimes I wonder if because it is individual and you go through something maybe the harder way than someone else would take, if it's almost like refining self-love because it's individual. And then that it's almost it felt almost to me like a vessel of love, whereas you refine that self-love, then you're more loving with your family or your partner. Does that make sense? Because when you
Yeah.
talk
Oh, it
about
does.
when you're struggling to live as yourself and the love is there, if you're not going far enough to really read this and you just think, oh, that's loving purpose and we have to struggle, that can just mean that you think a contentious relationship is normal
Oh,
versus someone who's like figuring out who they are and polishing their rough edges while they go through a process, and then they're different with their family because they did whatever.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I have just personally, I find that when I'm in like a safe, secure, loving relationship, it's like it's easier to find the right thing to struggle for. And it's not within the relationship. But
Mm,
when I'm like, when I was younger and like not married and like kind of looking for love, right? Like I feel like everything was a struggle. It's like that became the struggle
mm.
instead of the correct struggle. So I don't know. Yeah, that's something we might have to dive into more another
That makes
time. But
sense.
yeah.
Because the loving relationship lets you struggle to find your purpose. I don't think it always means that it has to be a struggle for purpose in the relationship.
Yeah, no, I've
Potentially.
never felt that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. What I found really interesting when he was talking about gate 41, and for him, it was hanging in an undefined root. And in rave psychology, when we're mapping the not self mind, which would literally be when you're going to go astray and your mind is going to say, this is the answer, he would call that gate basically true self because it is his and it's sitting there in a planet. Now, it is designed to meet the harmonic and receive some kind of conditioning, but that is your gate. And in this context here, he was basically saying, like, that's not his. He knows it always leads him astray. Now, maybe because desire is such a hot button for him, and he had some
I
like
noticed that too, and I thought interesting. Yeah.
interesting. What does that mean? But I wondered if that's like that idea of when we talk about love, because it is so much about, in this context, that search for wholeness in a natural, a normal, not self mind mapping. We would say, well, that's you, and you're going to be conditioned on the other end. But maybe it was treated differently in this context because you are conditioning love on the other end versus some sort of standard behavior. But this was a little, I'm sure there's an answer somewhere. But if I hold up extensive research and not self mind mapping with this particular lecture, there's a little bit where he made it sound like that wasn't really him. And yet it is. That's your gate. You just don't have consistent access to that gate.
Yeah. Well, and it's always going to change expression a little bit too, because depending who you hook up to,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
they're kind of changing the center depending who it is. So I could see it go both ways without it like
Yeah.
totally messing up my mind, but I did catch that too, and I was like,
Because according to him, for a not self strategy, when he's looking at especially the solar plexus or the root, it's like in the context of the root, the mind wouldn't care about gate 41 because there's something there. But in the context of the solar plexus, and maybe this is where he's coming from, because 41 is pushing at it, the solar plexus would say, I've got to handle this gate 30 that's not his. And maybe that's what he means. But technically, 41 was him. It's just not consistent.
yeah, I feel like he was
Yeah.
nice with 41 too, because a lot of times he'll make it sound like, oh, well, your partner is always gonna think about someone else or things like that. But then it's
Yeah.
like in this context, he did talk about like, you know what, maybe if your wife has a hanging 41, maybe she really loves to read romance novels. And
Mm.
you just don't take it personally. Like that feels like a very like soft way to talk about how this could be expressed versus really bad behavior being okay because you have something. And I was like, okay, yeah. Like maybe they're just really obsessed with an actor, who is in these films that they watch. And so I was like, okay, he did a pretty good job with that time.
And so for you, Rebecca, what's that like? Because you actually, you carry it.
Yeah, well, I think there is something to having the defined root with
Mm.
that. Maybe it grounds me
Mm.
in my desire. And I think to Kayla's point about reading a novel or watching a show, that gets us into the fantasy experience perfectly satisfactorily for
Mm.
myself. I think you can put a decision on how far you're gonna let your thoughts or fantasies go or not. Yeah, I think there is a difference with the undefined root and defined root in the way he was describing it, because again, just feel more grounded than his
Mm.
description by far. And I think what you were mentioning, Jen, about gate 30, I have a sense that he was talking about that without saying it. Like maybe
Yeah.
even kind of subconsciously or accidentally already referencing that not self gate 30 when
Mhm.
he's talking about this whole experience, and not saying that in order to maybe not confuse the situation,
Yeah.
that gate 30 is that extra desire, extra feeling
Mhm.
like you have to go experience life. So I could see him kind of mixing those up with this discussion because it's there, it's part of it. And he just didn't want to get things too confusing by starting to talk about the other side too much, maybe. That's my thought.
Yeah, it's a good point. I really liked, because we share gate 58, and especially for Kayla and I, where it's in our cross, and like that's not the nicest way he's ever described those. And one of the things that I appreciated here was the way I kind of thought about it was, it's almost like, let's say you're a yoga teacher and the people have come there because they want to experience yoga in your class. And if you guide them, oh, move here a little bit, relax here, it's not because they get a gold star for being a yoga teacher. It's because that helps you experience what you came there to experience and you asked for it. And I like that way of looking at 58, where if you're in nitpicking, criticism, judgment, whatever, is A, did they ask for it? Because it's a projected channel. And B, are you doing it because you want to get something out of it, or because it's truly altruistic and in service of the other? Because I think that's a difference, where that judgment in the 58 and the 18 can go really awry, is just because you see something doesn't mean that's your business. They didn't ask you, right? It's almost like we all have to be a projector there. And I really like that way of looking at it. It's much gentler.
And I know that I'm always looking for him to say nice things about 58
Yeah.
or 18. I'm like, good.
18,
Are you
yeah.
gonna say something nice? Are you gonna say something nice?
Yeah.
And he did offer some more helpful perspectives this time on that. And he did say it's a necessary way of improving our collective experience.
I know someone who has a 4426, and it's something to watch because his wife is successful and he is so proud of her.
Oh,
It's just a nice way to see it come out. Not be it's just he's so happy for her. And that is it's a lovely way to watch that love be expressed.
That's a nice example.
Yeah.
And so he did touch on the various different forms of connecting and dominance. Partner has a channel and you don't. Something about your partner that's always consistent. And in another context, it can be unbearable. I always have to act the way you want. Or there's the electromagnetic, where you each have a gate that forms a channel. There's attraction and repulsion, love and hate. Shock for not self, that attraction can almost immediately be hate. And then compromise. One has the whole channel, the other has only a gate. Not self screams, because you always have to compromise to where it leads to. And I believe in this section too is kind of what you mentioned, Kayla. I thought, did a good job of explaining not self and when you're more acting correctly, how there can be the different flavors of each of these connections.
I was going to say what it's like where if you carry the love gates, and let's say some of them hang, like I have a couple that hang, and all the other love gates I don't have any connection to, and I don't have any opposite side to, right? So what's it like if you're in a relationship? Potentially, it might always feel more plugged into you than it would to the other person.
Mm.
I think that was somewhere in one of these where he was talking about that feeling of I love you more than you love me. And like, maybe you do, because if I carry a 15 and a 5 comes along, there that is, or I carry a 46 and a 29, I'm affected more strongly because it's in a love gate. Or like maybe a parent favors one child and they don't even understand why. It doesn't have to be a sexual love, it could just be familial love. But that sense of they're just hooking into you, your attention is stronger there. So someone could go around feeling like, oh, this love beats me up, it beats me up, it beats me up, because that's where they carry their hanging gates and they're much more tender. Whereas, if I didn't have those two, at least they're more universal, right? They're not that they're the anti-mundane, but if someone is rife with mundane hanging gates, they probably might feel like they're just put through the ringer over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can you
just the more
imagine not having any of the love gates?
or not having any, and it's like you're just experiencing this crazy spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
transit.
this is a really awesome way that human design can help people, though. Like,
Yeah.
think about all these examples you just gave. When you do know, oh, this is what's happening, there's so much more actual love that you can have,
Yeah.
peace that you can experience, and just loving yourself, being true, and not having to be so confused about why is it always different with different people?
Exactly. What's wrong with me? Yeah. And more compassion. I think that's what I get the most. The more I study this and the more I experience it, and it's been so helpful with us talking. It's compassion. It's like this is literally how you're built, and that's fine.
Absolutely. So one of the quotes here, we think we're in love, and instead of living out what love really is for us, definition, we end up living the love that is conditioned by others. And in most cases, it's not just one way. You're conditioning that love in somebody, and they're conditioning another one in you, and you're both lost and looking for love in each other through something that's not real. It's not consistent. It's not you. It's not your definition. And you would never go there if you were correct. If correct, you meet it as a way to your love.
Mm.
I have another quote that I highlighted. He says, it's like beauty, it's everywhere. You just have to be able to see it. You have to see your own beauty, and what you have to see is that every single aspect that you have, let it be. Let it be. It's you after all. When you're correct and you let it be, you see what it's there for, and then you don't have to be fooled and in pain and in love. You don't have to be dependent in love. You don't have to think of yourself as only a reflection of somebody else's love. You are love. You're it. You're the most perfect example of you that you can be.
Mm.
Ra actually said that.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah.
There's another one. Love is something that is extraordinary because it is so beyond us. The moment that you're really living out your nature, the moment that you're just following your strategy, those aspects of you become refined. You begin to connect precisely to the right kind of energy. And he did talk in the book about a few other connections, the centers. What is in common between you is the core of the relationship, where you can go when it's
Yeah,
difficult,
yeah.
theme of comfort and relaxation. So for us, when we have our root, spleen, throat, we share those centers to find, we feel connected. We feel like we can understand each other. And he does say it's important to have, didn't you say even at least one?
At
One
least
where you
one,
can
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
have that sense of familiarity. And then in profile, he really started off strong with do not have left and right angles.
Mhm.
Yes, he did.
And then he kind of came around and said, but if there is left and right together, maybe you can find some connection with the resonance or harmony in the profile. And that was very interesting. I liked his example. And then in type, it says only bridge between types is your strategy. So even in some instances where he starts off strong, then he comes
Mhm.
around and basically, if your strategy says yes, if it's correct for you, then go for it. As long as you're open and aware and live, in alignment, then, have at it. But he did
Hmm.
say that you'll experience more challenges when there's vast differences. And did anything, stand out to you guys specifically in these sections?
I just feel like the profile section was very raw. Like you could easily spiral when you read this. Like I was like double checking me and I'm like,
Yes.
oh good, we have a bridge. Like I'm like, come on. And
But we're all right angle. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just funny because I could see people spiraling if they have one that doesn't bridge and they're
Mhm.
like, oh no, my relationship is doomed. And it's like, so that's where I'm kind of like, okay, like pump the brakes a little bit because when you read something for the first time in human design, it's like you just feel like it's all the truth and you're like, you could be bound for things. But it's also nice too when you look at profile and relationships that are like siblings and parents, you could see where you just like vibe more with some people than other because you have those things that you can connect with. And I get where he's coming from with the profile. I feel like it's true, but it's just always hard when he's like, this will never work if you have this, right?
Because you're a 2-4, a 3-5, and a 1-3. And yeah,
Like you said, right angle
but we're
helps.
all right angle. Yeah.
So I was trying to think of who are the left angle people in my life.
Mm.
And I have a couple of them who are a 6'2", and I'm a
Mm.
2'4", so we got the two.
Yeah.
But then I also have someone who is 6'3",
Mm.
and then we have to think about how do we connect?
Mm.
There's not a resonance
Mhm.
or a harmony, right? Between
Mhm.
2'4", 6'3".
Mhm.
Then it makes you wonder, okay, so we do have some centers that would be defined the same. And maybe the difference is the relationship is long distance versus in person all the time, Think
Or
about
how
things
much
like
you
that.
communicate.
Right.
Like you can just be with someone and not really say much, and that's fine. Maybe the bodies feel nice together. But I wonder too if a big part of this, like it would be way more intense. But like when you think about the variable grid and all the organization and the planning, like the bigger picture of all of this is how information gets moved. So sometimes when he's touching on things like this, I think he's really talking about how do things get communicated and does your base line up and all that other like really intense, crazy stuff.
Yeah. And there could be other electromagnetics
Yeah.
that are working differently, and that's how that relationship might work.
Definitely. I have quite a few 5-1s in my life, but we have the one as a bridge, kind of.
Mm.
So yeah, that might be an interesting thought experiment if you read this to kind of figure out what you're not harmonic with and see who you know in your life and what that relationship feels like. Because I would assume that that would be someone that you're just more like acquaintances with. It's like there's not that pull, that draw to have a deeper relationship with. And yeah, I mean, to Ra's point, if all this is correct, you probably wouldn't be drawn to be in like a romantic relationship with someone who isn't harmonic anyway, unless you have a lot of other things hooking up. So yeah, I just don't like when he gets so serious with it sometimes. Like when he's only negative about the 1858. So I'm like, could you just give me like a little sliver of
Something.
hope
Yeah.
here, please? Instead of me just correcting all the time.
I,
So
s-
yeah.
I saw Fixed Fate more clearly reading this because even
Mm.
though he was really mostly talking about the left and the right, I have a niece who's Fixed Fate, and like her relationships are so important to her. And it's like when COVID was going on and there was a lockdown and she couldn't be in school quite the same way. And like someone else could think, a hermit father might think, what's the big deal? And I'm thinking for this kid, that's everything. You know what I'm saying? But I saw more too, how like almost critical it is to make sure you're really with the right people, because those options maybe are a little more limited because the impact is going to be deeper.
Well, and I'm excited when we have one of our next future discussions that'll be more specifically on bridging splits,
Mm.
because that's a whole other angle. So that is coming up. And any final thoughts to share?
I want to end with a quote that for human design people I thought was really sad. So we're gonna end with this, okay? It says, Ross said, one day, if I have time, I will write an I Ching for the awake people instead of the where am I? Instead of the ones who are the one they have now, which is for the sleepers, because it's different. It's different when you're awake. And he never got around to that. And that would be beautiful to read. Because I
Yeah.
feel like we got like a sneak peek of that in this, where he was like, if this is the true self, this is the expression. And then here
Mhm.
he's got this little quote saying, like, it's on my to-do list, and then he never got
Oh,
to do it.
Yeah.
So
well,
I feel
that
like
does bring hope for everyone who is trying to maybe bring that expression forth. Whether
Mhm.
that's us or some of the others that are maybe now trying to bring Ra's final wishes out into the world. That's awesome.
And when you get a formal reading that is so based in the Ravi Ching, like to always remember, depending on where you are on your spiritual journey, that literally is designed to shatter, to like punch that not self hard in the gut. So it will like let go and wake up and to get the mind to pay attention. And not all of that may resonate because you may already be living at a higher vibration. And I think that's wonderful too. If the Ravi Ching doesn't make total sense to you, that could actually be good news because you're making your own path.
yeah, it's like once you get so far in the experiment, you can't go to the I Ching to be like,
Yeah.
oh, is this the expression? Is this, it's like you kind of lose that part of it. And so
Yeah.
I really recommend this book to people who are into human design. If you haven't read it and you happen to just wanted to get like a sneak peek through the video today, go through the gates because you're going to get a deeper understanding of what they mean in the true self form.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been fun. We'll be back next time.
Bye, everybody.